What if I told you that the floor underneath your feet right now, the one you've been walking on your entire life without giving it a second thought, has been slowly bleeding you dry every single winter? Not your furnace, not your windows, not even the gaps under your doors, your floor. The flat, silent surface you trust every single morning when you roll out of bed and plant your feet on it. And the worst part? There's an old Amish fix, one that costs about $5, that solves this completely. A fix that was hidden in plain sight for over 200 years. A fix the modern heating industry absolutely does not want you to find. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand something about your own home that most Americans will go their entire lives never knowing. And once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. Let me paint you a picture. It's January. You've got the thermostat cranked to 73, maybe 74 degrees. The furnace has been running since 5 in the morning. And yet you're still shuffling around your kitchen in wool socks and a hoodie because the floor, that cold, relentless, bone-chilling floor, is pulling every ounce of warmth right out of the bottom of your feet. You're not imagining it. You're not getting old. You're not just cold-blooded. Your floor is literally stealing your heat. And it has been doing it every single winter of your life. Here's the physics of what's actually happening. And I promise to keep it simple, because the real story here isn't about engineering. It's about a theft that's been happening in plain sight for decades. Heat always moves toward cold. Always. That's not an opinion, that's the universe's rule book. So when your furnace heats the air in your living room to a comfortable 70 degrees, and your concrete slab or your thin-framed floor is sitting at 55 degrees because the ground beneath your house is sitting at a constant 52 degrees year-round, that warm air you just paid for goes hunting for cold. And the fastest path to cold? Straight down through your floor and into the earth below your foundation. The average American home loses somewhere between 10 and 20% of its total heat through the floor alone. In older homes, anything built before 1980, that number goes higher. In homes with a slab foundation, an unfinished crawl space, or an exposed basement ceiling, it can hit 25% or more. Picture this for a moment. 1 out of every $4 you hand to your gas company, your electric company, your propane supplier, it's not heating your home. It's heating the dirt under your house. And here's the brutal part. That dirt, that cold earth sitting below your foundation, is essentially an infinite cold reservoir. No matter how many years you pump heat into it, it never warms up enough to stop pulling from you. You have been fighting a battle you were never built to win. And somebody knew that. Somebody banked on it. But before we get to the people who profited from your cold floors, I need to take you somewhere that will completely reframe the way you think about this problem. I need to take you to a farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio. And I need to take you back about 200 years. The Amish didn't solve this problem by accident. They solved it the way they've always solved problems. Through consequence, through community. Again, through passing knowledge down through generations without letting the outside world corrupt it. In an Amish home in the 1800s, if your floor was cold, your children got cold. If your children got cold, they got sick. If they got sick, there was no hospital down the road, no insurance card in your wallet, no fallback. So cold floors weren't an inconvenience, they were a threat. And that threat forced an elegance of solution that the modern building industry, for all its technology and all its conferences and all its billion-dollar lobbying budget, has never come close to matching. The traditional Amish floor is a 3-layer system that goes back even further than colonial America. The Amish brought it across the Atlantic from the German Palatinate region, where their ancestors had been refining it since the early 1700s. When those families settled in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, starting around 1737, they brought that floor system with them. And they never let it go. Here's how it works. You start with your subfloor, the structural base that everything rests on. Standard enough, then comes the middle layer. And this is where everything changes, because the middle layer is not foam. It's not fiberglass bats. It's not spray polyurethane or mineral wool or any of the patented products sitting on the shelves of your local big box store. The middle layer is something so simple, so cheap, so incredibly effective that the first time you hear it, your brain will push back and tell you it can't possibly be real. It's straw, specifically compressed rye straw, packed tightly between the floor joists and sealed with a breathable lime wash before the finished planks go down on top. Now I know what just happened in your head. I know because it happened in mine the first time I heard this. Straw? Like barn straw? Like what goes in a scarecrow? That's the solution to a multi-trillion-dollar energy problem? Yes, exactly that. And here's why. The principle behind every insulating material ever invented, every single one, is the same. Trap air. Dry, still trapped air is the most effective thermal insulator that exists in nature. Fiberglass works because it traps air in tiny glass fibers. Foam works because it traps air in bubbles. Spray polyurethane works because it expands to trap air inside a rigid matrix. Every modern insulation product you've ever seen or heard of is an engineered attempt to do one thing: trap air and hold it still. Rye straw, when compressed to the right density inside a sealed floor assembly, does exactly that, and it does it better than most of those engineered products. A study out of Pennsylvania State University measured the thermal resistance of traditional rye straw floor insulation at roughly R2.5 per inch. A 6-inch layer, which is what the Amish have been using for generations, delivers around an R15 floor assembly. Compare that to a modern builder-grade slab floor, which delivers an R value of less than 1. You're looking at a 15-to-1 performance difference, using a material that farmers have been throwing away as agricultural waste for centuries. Here's what happens when you really let that sink in. For roughly $5 per square foot at local farm prices, the Amish were achieving floor insulation performance that the modern construction industry charges hundreds of dollars per square foot to approximate using synthetic materials. And their version has been sitting in homes for 130, 150, 160 years, still performing. But before I tell you exactly how to use this in your own home right now, even if your house was built in 1975 and your floors are already finished and you have no intention of tearing anything up, I need to tell you about 1947, because that's the year this knowledge started getting buried. And it didn't happen by accident. In 1947, the National Association of Home Builders, working in close coordination with the newly emerging forced air heating industry, published a new set of residential construction guidelines. These guidelines quietly redefined what a standard American floor should look like. Before 1947, roughly 60% of American homes incorporated some kind of insulating floor layer. Cork underlayments, wool bat assemblies, horsehair felt, traditional straw systems. These were standard. These were expected. By 1965, 18 years later, that number had collapsed below 8%. 8%. Think about what it takes to change the construction practices of an entire country in less than 2 decades. It takes money. It takes influence. It takes the deliberate manufacturing of a new normal. And here's why it happened. Forced air central heating, the furnace and ductwork system that now sits in roughly 90% of American homes, only works as a business model if your floor is a heat sink. Follow the logic carefully. If your floor is properly insulated and retains warmth, your house holds its temperature longer. Your furnace runs less. You buy less fuel. You write smaller checks to the energy companies. Now multiply that across 50 million American households and ask yourself, how much money does the heating industry lose if people stop bleeding heat through their floors? The answer is hundreds of billions of dollars over decades. So the industry wrote specifications that made cold floors the standard. They trained contractors to treat floor insulation as optional, as overkill, as something that causes moisture problems and mold and structural issues. They funded trade publications that promoted synthetic foam products as the only acceptable modern solution, products that cost more, perform worse, and require professional installation that generates fees and labor revenue. They did not want you insulating your floor. They wanted your floor cold, because your cold floor was their business model. The Amish didn't read those trade publications. They didn't attend the conventions. They didn't apply for the government incentive programs. They just kept doing what their grandparents did, which was building floors that held heat instead of surrendering it. And while the rest of America spent the next 7 decades pouring trillions of dollars into heating systems, trying to overcome a problem that a $5 bag of rye straw could have prevented. The Amish were burning roughly a third the fuel to stay warmer. I've seen this with my own eyes. Not in theory, not in a case study. In an actual 136-year-old farmhouse outside Berlin, Ohio, where a family burned less than 2 cords of wood to heat their entire home through a full Ohio winter. Their house was large. Their winter was brutal. And their secret was underneath their feet the whole time. Now here's the part that matters most if you're sitting there thinking, okay, this is fascinating, but my floors are already in. My house is already built. I'm not ripping up my hardwood to stuff straw underneath it. And you're right. You shouldn't have to. Because here's the thing the Amish also figured out for exactly this situation. The most effective point to stop heat loss through a floor isn't on top of the floor, it's underneath it. If you have a crawl space, if you have an unfinished basement, if you have any access to the underside of your floor joists at all, you have everything you need. Here's the retrofit method, and it's exactly what Amish families use when they move into older homes that need upgrading, because yes, even the Amish buy old houses sometimes. You take clean, dry rice straw bales, which you can get from any farm supply store or directly from a local farmer, and you break them into compressed bats. Working from below, from your crawl space or basement, you stuff those bats up between the floor joists. You secure them from dropping out with chicken wire stapled to the bottom of the joists. Then you seal the whole underside with a breathable craft paper. Not a vapor barrier, a breathable membrane, so moisture can escape and mold never has a chance to develop. That's the whole system. No permit required, no contractor required, no demolition, no disruption to anything in the living space above. Total material cost for a 1,500 square foot home, sourcing straw directly from a local farm, somewhere around $300. Time investment, 1 weekend with 2 people. That's it. That's the whole project. And the results are not subtle. People who've done this report heating bill drops of 30 to 40% in the first month. The cold spots in their rooms disappear. The furnace runs less often and for shorter cycles. The temperature difference between floor level and head level, that vertical temperature gradient that's been making your legs cold while your head is warm, drops from 10 or 12 degrees down to 2 or 3. Your house stops fighting itself. Now, if you're somewhere that rye or rice straw isn't readily available, or if you want a code-compliant modern equivalent that uses the same principle, rock wool batts rated R23 installed between the joists from below with a vapor open membrane on the exterior face work almost as well. Slightly more expensive, around $6 per square foot, but still dramatically cheaper than any professional insulation job and still a weekend project you can do yourself. This is what the channel's secret vault exists to surface. Knowledge that was real, knowledge that worked, knowledge that quietly got replaced by something more profitable for someone else and less useful for you. But there's still one more piece I haven't told you yet. One final detail that the Amish floor system carries that nobody outside a handful of old communities still knows about. Something that was written down in 1789, rediscovered once in 1983, and then effectively forgotten again. Something that explains why, even on a cold day with no heating system running, the floors in those old Amish farmhouses feel warm to the touch. In 1789, a German Anabaptist carpenter whose descendants had settled in what is now Berks County, Pennsylvania, produced a handwritten building manual written in Pennsylvania Dutch. It was called the Hausbau Handbuch, the House Building Handbook, and it documented the construction specifications for a traditional Amish home from foundation to roof, including, on what would become page 47 of a later translation, a technique for finishing the plank floor surface that has no equivalent in any modern building resource I have ever found. For nearly 200 years, that document existed only in private family hands, passed from builder to builder within the Old Order community. In 1983, a researcher from Ohio State University's Agricultural History Department obtained permission to photograph one surviving copy. The photographs were archived, cataloged, and then essentially ignored by the broader academic and building science community for the next 4 decades. The knowledge sat in a drawer. The technique described on that page is this. After the straw insulation layer is installed and the wide pine or oak planks are laid down on top, the planks are finished with a warm mixture of 3 ingredients: raw linseed oil, beeswax, and bone char, a fine carbon-rich black powder made from charred livestock bones, something that farmers in the 1700s and 1800s produced routinely as a byproduct of butchering. The mixture is warmed gently and brushed into the wood grain while still liquid. It soaks in, hardens over the course of several days, and does something that no modern polyurethane, no modern varnish, no modern synthetic floor finish can do. Bone char is among the most thermally absorptive materials that exist. Its carbon lattice structure stores heat from sunlight coming through windows, from warm bodies moving across the surface, from a nearby wood stove or radiator, and then releases that stored heat slowly and steadily back into the room long after the original heat source has moved on or been turned off. Imagine this. A floor treated with this traditional mixture sits 6 to 9 degrees warmer than an untreated floor in the same room under the same conditions, without any heating system running, without any electricity, without any technology invented after 1789, 6 to 9 degrees of free, passive warmth. Stored in the surface you walk on every day, powered by nothing but carbon chemistry and 200 years of agricultural wisdom. This is why walking barefoot on the floor of an old Amish farmhouse feels different from walking barefoot on any other floor you've ever been on. It's not imagination. It's thermal mass. It's stored heat releasing under your feet. It's a technology that works better than anything modern industry has offered to replace it. And it was quietly phased out in the early 20th century when commercial butchering moved off family farms and bone char stopped being available as a domestic byproduct. The floor finishing industry filled that gap with polyurethane. Shiny, durable, utterly inert from a thermal standpoint. A beautiful piece of plastic sitting on top of wood, doing absolutely nothing except looking clean. You can still buy bone char today. It's available primarily as a water filtration medium. It's what makes some high-end water filters work. It runs about $12 a pound. A 1,000 square foot floor needs approximately 3 pounds of it. You mix it at roughly 1 part char to 4 parts raw linseed oil by volume. Add a small amount of beeswax for durability. Warm it on your stove over low heat and brush it onto your floor while it's still warm and liquid. The smell during application is earthy and mineral, a little like a blacksmith shop on a hot day. It fades entirely within 2 hours. Full cure takes about a week. When it's done, your floor will be darker, richer looking, and will function as a passive thermal battery for decades. You can apply it to existing hardwood floors without any major preparation. A light sanding to open the grain slightly, clean surface, and you're ready to go. The total material cost for 1,000 square feet, roughly $60 to $80. The result? A floor that is measurably warmer to the touch in all seasons, that stores heat from whatever sources are available in the room and releases it slowly over hours. Here's what the full 2-layer system, straw insulation below, bone char finish above, actually delivered for someone who tried both together. First winter heating bills dropped by more than 60% compared to the previous year. The furnace ran shorter cycles. The house held temperature through the night without the early morning cold snap that used to jolt everyone awake. The bathroom floor, historically the coldest, most miserable spot in the house, became tolerable without a space heater for the first time in years. And the floor itself, walked on barefoot in February, felt like something alive, like standing on sun-warmed stone in July. This is the knowledge that was taken from 2 generations of American homeowners between 1947 and now. Not through ignorance, through design. Because a house with a properly insulated, thermally finished floor is a house that needs significantly less from the heating industry. And an industry that makes its money selling heat doesn't want you needing less of it. This is exactly the kind of knowledge Secret Vault was built to surface. Real, documented, verifiable techniques that worked for centuries, and were replaced not because something better came along, but because something more profitable did. You've been paying someone else to heat the ground under your house for your entire adult life. Nobody told you there was another way, because if they told you, a 230-year-old handbook, a technique ignored by the building science community for 40 years, a retrofit you can do, in a weekend without a permit, without a contractor, without tearing up a single board, that's the whole story, and now it's yours.